else there on social media, Facebook, Twitter. I'm not even sure what else is out there that they're involved in, but they definitely have a presence. And through that, they'll be publishing articles, tips and tricks, encouragement, as the season moves on. One of the key things I want to talk about, though, is interference, this concept. It really is the core of what makes DI DI. The kids on your teams may be involved in, and probably are, involved in lots of other activities. But unlike all of them, as a team manager, you're not directing them in everything they do. If your kids are participating in music, they have a director that's leading them. They have prepared music that they're performing. If they're playing sports, there's a coach who may be calling every play they do while they're on the field. DI is completely different in that the team owns their solution completely. This comes from the idea stage. The ideas are theirs. You really should not see your version of a solution bleeding into their solution. And if you do start to see that, that may be where you want to dial back a little bit of how you're guiding them or how you're supporting them, I should say. But the ideas are theirs, the development is theirs, and the presentation is theirs. This gives the team total ownership of what they do. They feel it is their product completely. So if you can't do any of that, what does the TM do? So getting into the central challenge here, your role as the team manager is to be the challenge expert. You're going to work with the team to read, reread, and reread the challenge. They need to understand it, but you need to understand it along with them. We talked about clarifications and resources a little bit already. One thing as you're going through the challenges, though, there's some key words with must, will, should, and may. And those all have slightly different meanings as far as whether something is a requirement, a suggestion, or just something the team could do. Another thing you need to do in guiding them through the challenge is to look at scoring elements. Ultimately, that's where the points the team will earn come from. So you may have a team that does something phenomenally, but if it doesn't line up to scoring elements, they're going to be limited in their success. Your next role is as a facilitator. So this is project management, really. You're facilitating what they're doing. You're making sure the resources that the team needs are there. Let's see, Bluetooth, that really won't apply this year because we're all virtual. But one thing you need to understand as well is what is and isn't exempt as far as the team's expense report goes. It's kind of in a weird spot. Okay. And then finally, we talked about group dynamics, but, conflict resolution. The core of what it is to be on a DI team is that group dynamic. And your job there is to be the impartial referee that helps them get through that process and work together as a team. Your next role would be as a creativity stimulator. So, you need to help them through the ideation process. You need to help them with their brainstorming and then finally narrowing it down to a solution. Not your solution, their solution, but if you're letting the team continue to go in 1,000 directions at once, you need to bring that back in with them. Next role would be as an educator. You can't tell them what they need to do with their challenge or with their solution, but if the team decides we need to know how to use how to use a drill, we need to know how to use a sewing machine, we need the skills to build an electromagnet. These are things you can teach the team. The team should be identifying what they're looking for, what they need to learn, but absolutely, you are there to help them learn the things that they've identified. And if you don't know how to do it yourself, you can always bring in experts to help teach. Okay, interference deflector. And we've already talked about interference a bit, so I won't get into this too much, but you're also protecting their solution, not just from yourself, but from parents, friends, any other influence. If somebody tells them, oh, you really ought to do it this way, that's kind of where you need to be able to step in and keep that out of the solution. And I've seen teams that I've worked with in the past where the members have gotten to the point where they're not shy about, you can't give us suggestions, you can't tell us to do this. And that's great. And if you can empower the team to really kind of stand up for their own solution, that goes a long way. Chief safety officer, part of your role is to keep the kids safe. If there are dangerous solutions, if there are dangerous areas they want to get into in terms of content, either whether they want to portray something that may be inappropriate in their presentation, language, you're there to keep those sorts of things out of what they're working with. Okay, and then finally, approaching the challenge. This is a chunk that's in, I believe, every challenge. It's kind of boilerplate, but this really is one of the things that's also core to this. So this challenge can be solved on many levels, ranging from the simple to the complex. So some teams do have access to technologies and opportunities that other teams don't, but that doesn't necessarily give them an advantage as far as final scoring and that sort of thing comes together. Solutions can be very simple and elegant. Solutions can be very technical and complex. But the way scoring comes together, it does a good job of filtering that out. Nobody's really going to be able to buy a solution or buy success in this. So you want to focus on solving the challenge based on its intent. There's the should and may again. Those are places that would not be requirements. Everything else basically is. So if it says that build a vehicle, that's a requirement of the challenge. If it's the team may build a vehicle, then that's something where that's a decision point for the team to get into. We've already talked about clarifications. And then a lot of this boils down to just this last line here. If the challenge and the rules of the road don't say you can't do something, you can. DI does not set out to say you have to do this by doing that. They will say you need to do this. This is the requirement. There are some restrictions, but they are few. It's meant to be as open-ended so that teams really can go in any direction and come up with a solution that's ultimately theirs. Before we move on to Beth and team choice elements, do we have any questions anybody wants to cut in with at this point?
We're running a little bit ahead, so if anybody has anything they want to ask or talk about, go ahead and turn your microphone on. Okay, Beth, I think, anybody? Okay, Beth.
Okay. Well, we come next to, let's see, I guess an iPhone just entered the room. Okay. Team choice elements. And for those who have not done this before, this is another important part of the creative process. As you can see here, the team choice elements include about 15% contribution to the total score, in addition to the central challenge and in addition to the incident challenge. So team choice elements basically allow your team the freedom to develop elements of their own choosing, not to be scored along with central challenge, or be scored, but it'd be scored separately along with the central challenge. These are usually 2 team choices for each challenge, except improvisation. That's not included on the improvisation challenge. But again, 2 team choice elements will be included for each other challenge. And then next slide. The questions to ask when you're coming up with some of these choices are, for your team especially, what are the strengths? What are the specialties and special skills of the individuals on your team? And how can we incorporate those individual or group strengths or talents of the team? Are there special items that kids want to create, but they cannot be already scored in the central challenge? That's one of the most important things, that nothing they come up with as a team choice element can already be scored in the central challenge. And again, another question, has the team gone above and beyond on something that wasn't required? Now, there is a tool to use along with deciding some of these things. And one of them, and I believe it's in the Rules of the Road, or it may be, I think it's in Rules of the Road, but there's an interest inventory that you can use to have each individual on the team fill out this interest inventory, which is about 24 questions. And what it does is, in the end, what you do is you tally up these questions into formats, different formats, and they have it all there for you to come up with a tally of what different areas your team really has a lot of talents in. It might be musical, it might be nature, it might be physical movement or words and language. And as you see on this slide, some of the common types of team choice elements would be costumes or songs, dances, backdrops, set pieces, puppets, instruments. You might get somebody playing a song on an instrument. They might make an instrument. Gadgets, rhyming script. This can really be almost anything that can add to, their total score. And of course, team choice elements adds up to 60 more points. And it's a fun thing because it's something that the students can really come up with themselves. Okay. So team choice elements, there's no specific requirements, but it definitely can't be anything that's already being, scored as a required element. And that's important to keep reminding them. So this is really a free choice option, that's going to be scored, okay? And the ways it's being looked at, the ways it's being appraised, they're looking, and this will be on your data form, as far as the appraisers will go, they'll be looking at what's the creativity and originality of this chosen team choice element. How creative, how original is it? Is it something new, or is it something that's been done before? And how are the materials used? So sometimes you can have, a creative use of different materials and whatever product they're making, whatever object they're making. So creativity and originality are being scored. Next slide. And again, they're looking along with that, they're looking at the quality, the workmanship, or the effort, that goes into making these kinds of team choice elements. Was there preparation and planning and design that's been included? And oftentimes it's tough sometimes when you're working so hard on the central challenge, but did you forget about the team choice element and just pick something at the last minute? And I know when teams get really busy, this is like, oh darn, we forgot about the team choice elements part. So try to keep that in mind in your agenda when you're planning your agenda to include that. And lastly, are focus details evident? Like, what are we looking at? and are they evident? Next slide. So an important part of this also is integration into the presentation. Does it have significant meaning in the presentation? And that would be another part that's being scored. Is it used or just merely a part of the set? Does it impact the characters or the story in an interesting way? So they just have to keep in mind that yes, this whole, whatever they're creating needs to integrate into the presentation. Okay. And the teams, of course, they must highlight their TCEs in the tournament data form. And this is where when things come to the appraisers, they need to know what they're looking at. Like if the teams have written something in their data form, and it should be detailed information that can be found certainly in the rules of the road and the scoring section of each challenge. So they need to make sure that they're being specific about what they want the appraisers to be looking for. So again, they need to be sure that this is something that's obvious, that can be appraised and can be seen. Okay. I think that's probably about it for that. It's just making it, this time it'll be videotape, it'll be included in whatever video that the kids are making. So another part of that video, watching and appraising the video, is going to be looking for those team choice elements. Okay.
All right.
So let me just, well, I guess Doug, you'll talk about this. Never mind. I was going to say something about, there are 2 videos that you will submit. So go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, moving on to our final section here, and this may be what some of the veteran team managers have kind of come to find out or joined us today to find out, is what the virtual tournament is going to look like. And this is, one of many changes we're dealing with, but so for this year, each team challenge is designed to be solved creating a video presentation. From the challenges that are out, it looks like it's set at 5 minutes. There's a possibility individual challenges could have different restrictions on that. But the regional and the affiliate tournaments, affiliate is state, are going to be virtual tournaments this year. There will be no in-person elements to them. Your team needs to know about the various deadlines that will be coming up, as well as the overall timeline of the tournament. We have information for the regions tournament. But, there's a few of our dates are tentative. And at this point, the state tournament, we know roughly that it'll be in March, but we don't have details on that just yet. So deadlines. The registration deadline for the regional tournament is going to be January 8th. DI will be directly releasing instant challenge information, so that's out of our hands, on February 5th, with a deadline on February 8th to get your video back in. So unlike normal instant challenges, it's not 5 minutes there in the room. There is a little bit of turnaround time there, a little less instant, I suppose. But it is still a short-term challenge and solution. For those teams doing the improvisational challenge, the improv elements are going to be released on February 12th, which is the next weekend, basically, with a deadline on February 15th. Again, the material coming out is going to be coming from DI. And finally, team challenge submissions. Our tentative deadline is February 23rd. And that would be for all of the team challenges except for improv. That gives us a couple days to start to process the material you're submitting. And then going through the prep process, you'll get some feedback if there's anything we need more information regarding. If a form is missing, if some of the answers seem incomplete. So you may receive some feedback on or about February 25th. probably about a day to turn around and get that back to us. We'll be working on doing the appraising and generating feedback on, we think it will be on February 27th, will essentially be appraising day. And thanks to the online scoring system that we've used the last year or two in the region, that'll be turned around pretty quickly and back to teams. You'll receive it directly. Team managers will receive it directly through the system, I believe, or an email coming from DI. If there's anything in there that there are issues with, or you feel there may be issues, there is an appeals deadline, March 1st, somewhat tentative, but we feel good about that number. I think it has to be there so that we can turn around and do our closing celebration and release final results on March 3rd. I don't know exactly what that format's going to be. It may be a live stream. It may be a pre-recorded presentation. Vince, do you have any feedback on that, or still all options on the table?
More than likely, let me back up real quick. Part of that appeals is, like in the, say your challenge was to put a number of balls into a bucket, and the appraisers only counted 10 buckets, but that in your video there were actually 12 and one was hidden. That gives you the chance to appeal that ruling. So you get 2 days after your scores come back to do that. The closing celebration will be that Wednesday evening. It'll more than likely be a Facebook Live event. That way, whoever wants to attend can attend. Facebook Live lets you, put little hearts and likes and stuff like that. And so we're going to make a video part of it will be pre-recorded, but it will be a Facebook Live event on March 3rd. Go ahead, Doug.
All right, thanks, Vince. So now we're going to look at some of the ways that your solution is going to look a little different this year. So every video or every challenge, for the video you present, there is a time limit. Whereas in a live presentation, if you exceed your time, where somebody there would call time and nothing after that would be appraised. In this case, anything that goes beyond that on the recorded video would essentially be ignored for appraising purposes. The upside is that setup doesn't have to come out of that time. Since you're recording this under your own terms, the team can be completely set up so that from the time you call action, they're already into their presentation. Let's see. And that's going to be, we think that's similar with instant challenge, in that, if they hit that time limit, nothing after that point would be scored.
So,
essentially didn't happen.
Doug, if I can just say something. So getting back to the concept of interference or not, I think it's safe to say that no team manager thinks that the kids are going to show up and record this in one take and send it off. I'm imagining the best part about being virtual is you'll have a chance to someone flubbed their line, they can redo it. Resist the urge as a team manager to say, let's do it again. Ask them, are you happy with that? Are you guys ready to go? Let them decide on their own. Yeah, I want to change it. Let them look at that. Oh my gosh, we forgot to highlight this team choice element. So don't interfere. Let the kids decide. Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, there's really no reason the team can't feel by the time they submit something that it was their best performance they could give. I know come a tournament, we work to try and help the team give their best performance, but really here the team can make that decision and truly stand by that.
I also want to say one more thing. I'm sorry. Don't feel like don't clamp down on their creativity, but don't think that the kids need to have a Hollywood level presentation with flying toasters and all these other things. The appraisers are looking for the solution to their problem. Don't feel like the kids have to wow them with all special effects and stuff like that. It's whatever they really want to do. Go ahead, Doug.
All right. So moving on, in terms of the video submission itself, you know, you can put a little bit of a description with the video when you post it to YouTube. And we definitely encourage that you use that space to make sure you identify the team number, you know, challenge and level. There's going to be a lot of information moving around from our side of things as we receive what you're submitting. And we'd hate to accidentally watch the wrong video for your team, to get two of them mixed up, to where you receive somebody else's feedback and scores and they receive yours. Nothing else that's in those comments is going to be used in terms of scoring. So that wouldn't be a place to describe how hard the team has worked or how their team choice element works with the springs and magnets and, you know, whatever other details they have. We just want to make sure we have the right video and that we can positively identify it there. As far as the actual recording of your presentation, the team can use basically any space that's available to them. You know, there are and will be, I'm sure, guidelines on, you know, what you can and can't do in groups and where and under what circumstances. We have no idea where things are going to be in February, other than probably cold. But yeah, we don't know what kind of conditions you might be under. You may not be able to meet in, you know, in an enclosed space. The weather may be great and a sunny day would be perfect. But yeah, as far as whatever space you can use, there aren't necessarily space requirements or minimums. You know, normally we would say maybe you have at least 8 feet by 10 feet to work in. In this case, you have whatever's available to you. When you are recording, though, you want to make sure that everything that is required, you know, can be seen, heard, etc. in your video presentation. We don't want your team to work on a phenomenal backdrop that then is blurry and in shadow for the entire presentation. There's only so much the appraisers can do. If it's not in the video, we really can't work with it, unfortunately. Wherever you do end up working, make sure, you know, by the time you're done and tear down what you've done, it needs to be cleaned up. That would be normal for our competition sites. But in this case, if you're going out into the community and using spaces, public spaces or whatever, we want to make sure that as, you know, ambassadors of DI, that we're not leaving a bad impression by, you know, trashing things or even just, you know, making a mess of glitter and whatever else we get into.
If I may, Doug, just this is kind of maybe for the Oakwood teams that might be there. You know, Oakwood still has a prohibition on meeting in person. So certainly it is possible. And you can go onto the DI website and see some of the challenges that were submitted over the summer. Some of the kids, their actual video they submitted was a Zoom recording. So the 7 kids were all in their own Zoom reading, their Zoom windows, and they put on their challenge. They performed through Zoom. Someone had a costume on, there's a backdrop in another window, and they recorded that Zoom session and then submitted it. So don't feel like your team needs to meet in person in order to film this. It is possible to do this 100% virtually.
Yeah, I'm sure all the school districts have some restrictions on what they're allowing through school activities. Yeah, just make sure you know what your schools require and keep in mind whatever other requirements are out there. So let's see, final point here, just like in a regular presentation, only the team members can do the setup, but non-team members can help tear down, clean up when you're done. Okay, so on top of your regular video presentation, you've got the opportunity to submit a Q&A video. This basically takes the place of after your presentation when the appraisers would come and ask about, how did you paint this? Whose idea was that? Tell me more about your rhyming scheme. All the sorts of things appraisers, you know, love to know And unfortunately, we're going to miss that interaction here. But this is your opportunity to kind of anticipate the questions or just highlight the things that you want to. I believe the time limit for this is 3 minutes in the challenges I looked at, but consult the individual challenge just to see what the requirements are. For your scoring elements, they need to be in the team challenge video. If they only appear in the Q&A, they essentially didn't happen during your performance. But again, you can get into excuse me, you can get into a lot more detail on the workings and the minutia through that Q&A video. As with the video presentation, you're kept to a length here. Anything that goes beyond that, the appraisers really aren't going to be able to look at. So get the important stuff out of the way in the beginning. But again, since the teams are going to be editing and submitting these videos, I don't know that there's necessarily any reason that you would extend over time. I mean, that is something the team totally has control over. Let's see, moving along. Everything that's going to be submitted in regards to the virtual tournament is going to be going through the resource area. Hopefully you've all been there already. If you've got a team registered, if you're signing up for your background checks, if you're getting into the challenge information, it's all going to be through the resource area anyways. It would be in a normal year, but that they're going to lean heavily on that in terms of submitting the links to videos, submitting the tournament data form, which is another place you have opportunity to tell us a little bit more about your solution. Your expense report's going to be there, and the prep checklist is going to go through there. When you do post videos to YouTube, you want to set the visibility to unlisted. That will let anybody who has the link access it, but nobody's going to just accidentally stumble across your video. So that we'll be able to keep it just to tournament officials, essentially. And you do need to keep the video there until the tournament is complete. So don't take it up down the next day. You know, our appraiser timeline may shift, or if there's anything with the dialogue process, or we have questions about something, that video needs to be up the whole time. That seems to be what we have on that. We don't think the details will change too much as far as the tournament, but we'll definitely be in touch if and as some of those dates shift, or we learn more about, say, the state tournament, which is still a little bit more in flux, other than probably a similar process just about a month later. Okay, so let's go ahead and open up to general questions and answers.
So we know you got plenty of questions. We'll also entertain if anybody has their own, if you've had meetings and you want to throw out a hint or a tip, go ahead and throw that out. I know this is harder online. Normally we'd be in a meeting right now and you'd be chatting with the person next to you, but just feel comfortable to turn on your microphone and ask a question.
I guess I've got a question for some of the veteran team managers, and I know we've got a few in the session here. What are your concerns as this moves virtual? I mean, is there a lot of concern about running meetings virtually? Is the concern more on, you know, producing a video rather than a live presentation? I'd just be curious to kind of get a feel for that.
You know, sorry, this is Rob Thompson here. I think one of the things from a, you know, if we'd have to work virtually is access to materials. You know, it oftentimes in the solutions that we've worked on, the, you know, a build or an element of the central challenge requires multiple kids to work on. So just access to materials to help support their solutions is probably the big concern I've got.
So if you're in Miamisburg and you're prohibited from meeting in person, I mean, that's something you need to respect. You know, it may just be a matter of, you know, team member one is going to paint the backdrop, and when that person's done, then they're going to leave it on their driveway, and someone else is going to come pick it up and create the structure that holds it. I mean, you'll have to get creative about that. One thing you want to do is either using the whiteboard that Matt talked about, or something like Google Docs, where, you know, if you have a script that you're developing, you know, the kids will want to create that script out there on some shared drive so that they can all look at it at the same time. There's nothing worse than one person updating a script and then someone else updating it thinking they have the latest copy when they don't. So use something like Google Docs or Microsoft OneDrive so that so the kids are all looking at the same document at once. What we're going to do right now, just in case anybody feels constrained, I'm going to ask Matt to go ahead and stop the recording. And then if you want to feel free